Well, happy Friday. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We were speaking ahead of time before we officially opened the Lunch and Learn to everyone about how extraordinary this topic is. So, thank you all for taking your Friday afternoon to join us. It's such an important conversation and something that we all can take part in. So, I want to thank Beth, Scott, and Lizzie for being here with us today. So hopefully you're going to be able to learn a lot about the topic at hand and then also be able to not only apply the lessons and tips and tricks that you will learn today in a business setting, but also too in your regular everyday life. I think you're going to be able to learn a lot and take a lot away from this and help people and yourselves at the same time. So as we get started here, my name's Ashton Adler. I am with South Florida Tech Hub, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm the Director of Talent Engagement for Tech Hub. And so, for those of you that may not be familiar with what Tech Hub does, we are the only regional tech association in South Florida. So, we represent Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach County, and the Treasure Coast now as well. We've expanded, and so that's a very exciting thing. But several of our everything that we do goes towards continuing to build our tech ecosystem. So, from my aspect as the director of talent engagement, talent is one of our core pillars. So, we work with educational institutions, so K through 12 higher ed and boot camps, to connect them to our member organizations. So, we have over 160 members, corporate members, and strategic partners. So our members range everywhere from City Furniture to Office Depot and FPL, all the way down to midsize and startups. So we're really happy to be able to put on lunch and learns and programming as well. So we have upcoming next week, sponsored by City Furniture at their headquarters in Tamarack. We have our 24-hour hackathon, and it's an incredible opportunity for people to dive in and get that experience. There's a lot of really great prizes, up to $5,000 in cash prizes, as well as a React Miami prize. So I know we'll be popping that into the chat, and it's accessible to all. And I think that's the perfect way to really kick off this conversation, because one of the things that we strive to do at Tech Hub is to make everything accessible, to have ASL interpretation at everything we do as much as we can, because it's such a critical component to including everyone and being the best that we can be as a community and for tech organizations and all organizations in general. So without further ado, I am going to hand it over to Beth Wagmeister. She is just incredible. Not only is she just a phenomenal person in the community and a Tech Hub partner, but she also was the recipient of a Golden Palm Award. So very, very well deserved. And I know that Beth will be able to guide everyone through this presentation. I learn from Beth every single time that I am around her. And then we also have Scott as well. So I will hand it over to you all. And then Scott, when you all transition, I will spotlight you to the screen as well. So without further ado, Beth, take us away.
All right. Hi. I really do have a voice. It's so exciting. I know normally when I'm on screen, I don't have a voice. So Lizzie is my hands today. And I'm really grateful that she's here. And I'm glad that everybody was able to join us. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I do this properly because you all are the tech people. Awesome. And I am not. So awesome. Thanks, Ashton, for the thumbs up. I was really in a little alliteration type of a mood while I was putting together this deck. So I've called this Actionable Advice for Accessibility, AAA. And that has a lot of meaning in the disability community of different ratings that I'm sure Scott will be able to talk about in a little while. So without further ado, things that you can expect today. We're going to talk about 10 plus things you can start implementing to be an ally for people with disabilities in the workplace. And I really want this to be conversational. I don't necessarily need it to be straight presentation, but I don't want to forget things because I've waited a long time to have an opportunity. So I don't want to forget anything. So feel free to just, uh-oh, hang on. We're gonna talk about the ADA, what's it all about, and how does it apply or not apply to me or your business. We're going to talk about accessibility with websites. Scott Trachtenberg is going to come on in a little while, and I'll give him his time to explain his area of specialty with websites, apps, PDFs, marketing materials, Zoom, the whole shebang of the tech world. And we're going to talk about having a seat at the table. It's super important to make sure we're including people with disabilities instead of just making decisions for people with disabilities. All right, so with that being said, oh my goodness, Beth. Can you still see my screen? Okay, because I
Yes.
can only see myself, so I'm gonna myself. Okay, so yeah, for a second, I'm going to talk about me, and I hope you don't mind. I hope you'll be forgiving. But again, I have been a part of this tech ecosystem for the past 4 years. The pandemic brought me to Tech Hub, and I'm so grateful for the opportunities that I've had to guide and to work with and to learn from Nikki and the entire staff and everybody in the ecosystem. You all have been so warm and welcoming, and to be honest, the most open-minded I think about accessibility is the tech ecosystem. You know, we're coding for tech, and we're coding for disabilities, for accessibilities, but we definitely have to take it a step further and provide access for the things that we're learning to be able to teach other people. I am a proud winner, as Ashton mentioned, of the Inclusion Champion Award at the Golden Palms Award. I was really excited about that, a little shocked, but very thrilled. I feel like I'm just a big pain in the neck about ADA and all that comes with it, but they heard me, or they just were trying to shut me up, one or the other. I'm not really sure, but I'm going to go with the first, I think. I have been around town a lot. I interpret the hackathons, as Ashton mentioned, workshops, boot camps, tech conferences, etc. Different events all around the ecosystem. And I've been known to some as the tech chirp of South Florida, but I don't know. I think Lizzie's taking over that, even though she's from Chicago. She's taught me a lot. We always are learning. I've done a lot of coding classes, coding class challenges. You see, I was still doing that alliteration thing. And I had a lot of challenges because the first time I was in a seat talking about a server, I was signing it as if it was a waiter or a waitress. The sign for server is very different on everyday language versus tech language. So I had to really study up and learn the difference to a language I knew nothing about, which was really very challenging, but really fun. And I've really enjoyed the challenge. I have been in the accessibility space for 37 plus years. I started when I was 2. So yeah, and I've just been doing it a couple of years now. Here we go with my alliteration again. I learned at camp. Everybody asked me, where did I learn sign? I was 10 years old. I learned at overnight camp. Went to college and studied American Sign Language interpreting. And then I became a colleague to so many. And then I decided to go off and become a consultant on my own. And that's how WAG came to be. Another quick fact, I just graduated myself a couple of years ago from advocate to activist, again, the AA. I feel like being an advocate will always be something I'll do first, but advocates typically suggest change and activists kind of enforce change. So yeah, I'm the activist enforcer. I think that's what we'll call me. Forget the tech terp South Florida. We're going to call me the, anyway, no, just kidding. But anyway, I want to make sure that everybody understands the rights and responsibilities under the ADA. And my why basically in the workplace accessibility is to provide equal experiences for everybody, and that with a little bit of some creative thinking and trainings and understanding and accessibility, we could make the workplace a friendlier place for people with disabilities and stop fearing things we don't understand and start to embrace them. So that's kind of about me. And I feel really weird just talking about myself, but it's important every once in a while, I suppose. Okay. Now I just wanted to have a quick overview of the ADA. We're not talking about the American Dental Association, in case anybody was hoping you were going to get a lesson on that. We are talking about the Americans with Disability Act, which is only 34 years old. 1990. I mean, my daughter was born in 1992, and I'm like, wow, she's, so young, but people with disabilities have been around for centuries and centuries and centuries, and we're just finally having rights at 34 years ago. So it's a little disconcerting, but we need to get with the program. And what does that look like? Employment, Title I, state and local governments, public accommodations, telecommunications, and then miscellaneous for small and large businesses. And I know, Scott, you wanted to hop on and talk quickly about part of the ADA here. So if you want to
Yeah,
add your sense, and then, maybe just introduce yourself and then talk about that. And if we could
sure.
spotlight, well, yeah, that'd be great. This is Scott Trachtenberg, everybody.
Yeah, nice to virtually see everybody. I own a business called ADA Site Compliance. I'll make my long story short. I owned another business for most of my career, was in the sales process of that business, and received a demand letter that our website wasn't accessible to a plaintiff, to a user who's blind. And it was my introduction to digital accessibility. And like anyone who receives litigation, I wasn't happy for the first 24 hours or so about it, and knew that it was going to create some issues. But was lying in bed that second night and said, wow, it makes perfect sense that people with disabilities, of course they should have access to digital content, to websites, apps, documents. It can improve their quality of life. And so it completely flipped real quickly for me, and I became somewhat obsessed with it. And here I am. That was about 8 years ago, that letter. Here I am about 7 years into this business, and pushing hard for all the right reasons to ensure that all digital content's accessible. So that's my real brief introduction. And back to the ADA, an interesting part of what I do, especially dealing with a lot of litigation, only on the defense side to help people, is that the ADA never mentioned websites or digital. And why? Because there were no websites or digital. There was software, of course, back then, but there were no websites or apps. So that's a constant push and pull up until very recently. And again, I'll touch on it a little bit later, that the Department of Justice has firmly weighed in on that piece.
Sorry.
Oh, you're good. That was it. Perfect timing.
I wasn't trying to cut you off. Sorry about that. That's the wrong thing. Thanks so much, Scott. Yeah, we'll definitely get into more of that in a little bit, but it is a very good point that you can't put something into law that doesn't exist at the time. So websites were not there, but they're a very important part now, and we will get more into that. But let's talk about small and large business and tax credits, because with the ADA comes a lot of like reconstruction of things, adding accessible bathrooms, adding ramps. Well, that all costs money, and businesses don't want to have more expenses than they have budgeted for, or really want to do if they don't see return on their investment, having patrons that come that might be wheelchair users or need mobility devices, or whatever the need is. But businesses were going to complain about the money. So Uncle Sam was one step ahead and said, okay, I'll offer a small business and large business tax credits. So let's just take a peek at that and see what that's all about. I'm not going to read all of this to you. You could read it yourself. We could share the deck if you would like. But this is for large businesses. That does not mean large to infinity and beyond, right? So here are the revenues in front of you. The tax credit can cover up to 50% of expenditures. So people don't know that they're there. Have a conversation with your tax, your accountant or whoever does your taxes, and talk about the tax credit. You could use it for offsetting the costs of removing of barriers, putting signage like with Braille, making sure you have sign language interpreters. And it's important. So everybody's saying, I don't have the money. I don't have the money. Well, Uncle Sam's saying, hey, we'll be able to provide you with something if you were going to make these accommodations, because it is the law. And, as much as we don't want to stop at the stop sign, we know that we have to, because it's the law. And if you don't, and you break the law, there's a citation. It's really hard to get the follow-up on what happens unless somebody sues, and we could talk, Scott will talk more about that. But here's just a little tidbit for you large business owners saying, I can't afford an interpreter, and it's never the cost of the interpreter on that particular event. So if you have an event and it's gonna cost $4,000, just say, to provide sign language interpreters, you can't say, well, the person's only spending $300 to come in, I'm really taking a hit. No, it's your total revenue of the year for your corporation will decide if you're taking a hit in order to provide an interpreter or remove barriers, etc. All right. And here it is for small businesses. It doesn't apply, the Americans with Disabilities Act does not apply to businesses with fewer than 15 employees, but there are some exceptions. So if you have less than 15 employees, sometimes people can come after you and it doesn't even apply to you. I had that happen with me one other time. There was a woman who owned a mom and pop lingerie store in Boynton Beach. And somebody went, a blind gentleman went onto the Yellow Pages and stopped. Her business started with A, so she was hit right away. And he went on their website and couldn't navigate his way around the website. So he made a phone call and said, I'm going to sue you if you don't make your website accessible. Well, nobody wants to be sued, as Scott mentioned. Nobody likes to get that type of a response. So she said, don't sue me, I'll pay out of pocket. Well, they went back and forth. She wound up paying a lot of money out of pocket not to get sued, and then came to realize that the ADA didn't even apply to her. She was exempt from having to make things accessible. So you have to know that people could come after you and what your rights are, as well as the rights that you have to make things accessible for people. So this is just something else you can take a peek at. And then, as promised, 10 tips, top 10 tips by AI, trying to use the tech you taught. Look, I don't know. I was really into this alliteration stuff, but I asked AI about what are the top 10 things, and a lot of them that came up were really interesting, but this is mine. Prioritize accessibility, hashtag remove the ask. I really want my legacy to be left on that we take off asking for an accommodation, take off, just start planning, budget, have a line item for accessibility. If you don't use the funds that you have one year, roll them over to the next year. It's doable. That's why I put it up there twice. Make sure physical spaces and interactions are accessible and digital. And Scott's going to talk more about that as well. Use and learn inclusive language. Disability is not a bad word. When people say specially abled or something like that, or they tiptoe around saying disabled. Disability is not a bad word. So let's just learn more about that. Educate yourself what you're doing today. And I appreciate the fact that you're here learning, taking the step to learn more, have the conversations about the ADA. I feel like people fear things they don't understand. And if we have a better understanding, then we could make this world a little bit better. It's important to accept feedback from people with disabilities. It's not always a criticism. Use it as a learning tool to grow. Like, understand that feedback is your friend. It also will eliminate lawsuit. Again, back to Scott. Ask before helping somebody with a disability. If you see somebody that's a wheelchair user, ask them, would you like me to get the door? Do you need a push? Can I help you? Instead of assuming that they're going to need your help. And we want to avoid making assumptions and giving advice unless asked for it. That's across any industry, I would think, but especially with people with disabilities. And then you want to make sure we involve people with disabilities. There's a term called nothing about us without us. And that is the mantra for the disability community. We need people to stop making decisions on what they think we need. We want to be asked, what do you need? What do you need on a website? What do you need to have the experience equal as anybody else? And take the time to accept the feedback. Ask them about how we can help. Avoid assuming that we know what's best for somebody with a disability, and involve people and have them at a seat at the table and employ them invite people with disabilities to share their experiences, and respect disability status. Oh, you don't look deaf. What does that mean? Oh, you can see that. You're not that blind. Could you prove that you have this disability in order to get accommodation? We need to just accept people for what they say and who they are. And please hire people with disabilities. It's not that hard. It's just about understanding what you need to do. We have job seekers on the call right now who are looking for jobs in the tech community who are very capable of doing a wonderful job. They just need an opportunity, and we need to understand the tax credits, understand the equipment people need in order to be successful on the job. And think progress over perfection, right? So you're not going to be perfect. You're going to make a mistake. You might say differently abled instead of disabled. Correct it, fix it, look at it, and move on. Don't hold yourself to that. If you don't have it right on the first go, it's going to be problematic. So, and just understand that disabilities are a spectrum, right? It's not a one size fits all. Not one person needs the same thing. And that goes across everybody, able-bodied or disabled people. We all need what we need. And if we understand that and have an open mind and an open heart, we could really make things different. So on that note, I'm going to invite Scott back, and we're going to have a changing of guards here for a second. So this is going to be interesting. How I'm going to advance and interpret at the same time is what's, we'll see. I want to give Lizzie a break from her hands moving. I appreciate it. And I'm going to interpret for Scott, and then I'm going to advance all at the same time. Okay. All right, Scott, the show is yours.
And I love the think progress over perfection. I always say something's better than nothing. Start the process, because it can be overwhelming to think about the brick and mortar side and the digital side. There's a lot to do, but just start the process. So one thing that I'd like to mention is many people have hidden disabilities, and most people, unfortunately, will end up with some sort of a disability over the course of their lifetime as they age. So for myself, I have dyslexia. Call it a hidden disability. Most wouldn't know, but it's a thing for me. I didn't realize until I got into the space that there's certain font styles that are actually better for me, that are helpful. And so that is a thing that's part of our testing process that we go through to make sure that that users have the right font styles. So I'll run through parts of the lists. I may skip over some of it, but I wanted to give some examples of what would make a website or an app, but we'll talk about websites mostly, not accessible to a user. So color contrast. This affects not only users with disabilities, but most users. I'm sure that you've been on a website and you have a hard time reading something because the font color and the background color are too close. So that would be inaccessible. So not only do these items affect those with disabilities, but oftentimes they affect all users. Pictures on websites, how would they be inaccessible? Someone that can't see the picture, so someone who's blind, would use software to have a website read to them. It's called screen reader software. It's pretty amazing. And most people who are blind would speed up the language on it. It's almost too fast for an average user to even hear, but they can fly through a website if it's coded properly. Pictures, what would they need? They need proper alt tags. So in the code, alt tags traditionally would have either been for, let's say Google, for as they're searching websites. It would the alt tag would have nothing to do with the picture itself. It would say something like and I'm making it up, but the best Mexican restaurant in South Florida, rather than it's actually a picture of food. It's a picture of a burrito with beans and rice. So that's what the alt tag should actually say, is that it's a burrito with beans and rice. The software would then read that picture or read that alt tag, and it would recognize that it's a picture, and it would say picture burrito with beans and rice, so that the user who can't see the picture now understands what that picture is. And another interesting piece with pictures is that if they're only decorative, they're just there to make the website look nice, then you would put an alt tag that would actually have the screen reader skip that picture because it doesn't mean anything for the actual website and the use of it. Videos need captioning. So most people recognize that. You see it on your TVs. But videos also need audio descriptions. So somebody who can't see what they're watching, if there's a gap in time of the actual audible piece of that, you would need a description so they can understand what's happening at that period. PDFs, so documents in general, mostly PDFs is what we see. If you have any PDFs that are on your website or even that you provide to people, those have to be made accessible as well. So that's done in the code, it's done in the background. It doesn't mean that the doc, and likewise for websites, the work done to make a website or a document accessible and usable for all, it in most instances doesn't actually change the look and feel and functionality of those items. Color contrast, yes. So the first thing that I touched on, color contrast issues, yes, that may be a visual change to the actual piece of the website, but for the most part, it's all done in the code. Maps and calendars, very difficult to make accessible, but you can make them more accessible, and maps are really common on websites. We have not seen maps or calendars named in litigation, not that I'm aware of at least, so a little bit of a less of a threat on the legal side. Beth, you want to go to the next page?
Okay, maybe.
Thank you. I'm not going to touch on everything on this checklist, but I'll touch on a few of the items, and I've already touched on some as well. An accessibility statement is something that's really important to have in the footer of your website. The real intent of that accessibility statement is so that someone who gets stuck on your website, users with disabilities, are aware that there should be accessibility statements, and it provides alternate forms of contact, hopefully an email address and a phone number that person can reach out and get assistance, and also make you aware that there may be an issue, a block on your website. For accessibility statements, if you want to go to the ADA site compliance website and borrow ours, feel free. You'll just have to tweak it with your own email and or phone number to make it your own. Keyboard accessibility. So this is another interesting one. So I mentioned screen reader software that users who are blind would use. They also use keyboard combinations. So where maybe you use a keyboard combination to print a document or save a document, there's hundreds of keyboard combinations. And back to somebody utilizing those can fly through a website, even if they can't see it, if it's coded properly. The most important keyboard navigation would be the tab key. People who are blind use that tab key, and as they're navigating, so as they hit tab, it would go across, if you have navigation up top, it would go across the top navigation, and they can hit the drop downs and it would be read to them so they can get to the proper spot in their process. Beth, will you go to the next page? Litigation, it's something that has to be discussed. It's what's driving a lot of positive change. No one wants to receive litigation. There are a lot of lawsuits being filed against companies and governments because their websites, apps, and documents are not accessible. There's many more demand letters going out. It's been estimated that there's hundreds of thousands of demand letters being sent out by plaintiffs' attorneys for this exact reason. It's an easy game on their side. If you're not doing anything to make your website accessible, it's not accessible. It doesn't just happen. You actually have to go in and actively make updates to the code to make it accessible. So everyone's essentially a sitting duck. If a plaintiff's attorney lands on your website and they're trying to get you, if you're not doing anything, they've got you. And most of the lawsuits and demand letters are essentially a copy and paste. It's almost all the same information that we see in those documents. the litigation side is driving positive change, right? So I never wanted to receive a demand letter, and let's put aside the fact that it turned into a business for me, but it educated me, and around that, I've educated a lot of other people as to the importance of ensuring that their digital content is accessible. When I first got my demand letter and I looked at websites, and even really large businesses, they didn't have accessibility policies. Their websites were not accessible. And now, fast forward 8 years later, I'd say that the majority of websites now have accessibility policies, and that many people are attempting to at least make changes and positive updates to their websites from an accessibility standpoint. One huge piece in all of this is that the Department of Justice just came out with a new rule, and it's for Title II, which is government. And what they have demanded is that all governmental entities ensure that their websites, apps, and documents are accessible. There's some caveats to it. It's not necessarily legacy documents, but everything moving forward. And I won't start down the rabbit hole on all of that. But what is very likely to happen, and our contacts at the Department of Justice have told us will happen, is that Title III, which is for businesses, will come next. And it's essentially going to be a very, very similar rule to the Title II rule. But the Department of Justice is going to enforce it. They've already actually begun doing it without even rolling out the rule. They've begun going after businesses and governments. And so this is going to open up the floodgates. The plaintiffs' attorneys, there's been some pushback from courts and different rulings in different directions. Some courts have said this is a thing and we side with the plaintiffs' attorneys. Others have said we side with the defendants. There's no siding in any direction other than with the plaintiffs once the Department of Justice rolls this out. So get out in front of it if you can. Make it a priority. Utilize the tax savings that come along with it. Even for my own business, I utilize the tax savings. Why would we not, right? We're making all of our content accessible. There's a cost to it. As a business owner, for any of you that own a business, it's dollars right in your pocket. If you spend $10,000, it's $5,000 less in tax that you have to pay. And I'm not an accountant, so speak with your accountant about it. But at least for my business, it's really cut and dry in terms of how that works. Do you want to roll to the next slide? A huge caution to everyone. There are tech companies out there that are in the space, and if you go to their websites will look essentially like the website for ADA site compliance. It tells you that essentially we know how to do this, we know how to do it the right way. We will adhere to what's recognized as the proper rules around it, which are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. They're very creative in their language and in their marketing, super crafty. Technology can only find about 30% of the issues. So utilizing free technology, purchasing a widget to put on your website, purchasing an overlay to go on your website, they can't get you most of the way there. You have to do human testing, human auditing, and code remediation. It's the only way to get it done. So, I'm sorry, it's a little bit of bad news in all of this. I would say most of our business comes on referral from defense counsel. So somebody receives litigation, they go to their lawyer refers them to us to fix it for them. Right now, so go back 7 years ago, people would get the litigation and they'd have no idea what it meant. They didn't know anything about it. Now the majority of people coming to us say, well, we thought that we were accessible. Our website developer told us we were accessible, or we added this widget or this overlay that we thought made us fully accessible, and they don't. So we have to break that bad news to them. Had they started making changes to their code, even utilizing technology, they're further down the path, right? Back to something is better than nothing. So even if that's the route that you take, that you find free technology that can scan your website and you fix just those items like color contrast and adding proper tags to your website, it's better than not doing anything. but there's likely to be roadblocks for many that use assistive devices that they just won't be able to navigate your website pretty early on. They'll be stuck. So be really careful with technology. Technology definitely plays a part in it. Even for our company, we have amazing technology. We just don't sell it as a standalone because it only gets you so far, right? It's not good enough. So be very careful with that. I highly encourage everybody start to take the steps on every side. What Beth was speaking about on the brick and mortar side and also on the digital side. Start the process. If you have the budget and the ability, do as much as you can, as quickly as you can. It's not only from a legal standpoint, it's the law, right? You have to do it. But of course, it's a feel good. Like, it feels great. You'll feel really good, and it's something that you should be proud of if you're already doing it. And if you're not, and you start doing it, you should definitely have a sense of pride around it, and it's good for the culture of your business.
Awesome. Awesome. We're going to ask Lizzie to come back on. Changing it. Okay, we got you here. Great, great, great. Thank you, Scott, so much. That was really informative. And I'm sorry I didn't add our contact information. I saw that note a little late, sorry. But we're really just trying to create a culture of inclusion. DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. And truly, it should just be DEI. We shouldn't have to add the A. And I know Nikki's probably falling off her chair right now because I'm always saying A. But if we were truly DEI, A would be a part of that. But since it's not, we have to have it stand out. And if you want to switch up the letters for your own agency and have it IDEA, inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, whatever it is you want to do, we have to think about people with disabilities. We have to remove the ask. And we have right here in our ecosystem, two, if not more people, at least Scott and I, who are here to bounce ideas off of. We're here to chat with you if you're feeling overwhelmed or don't really know where to start. I've also provided this page here in order to share some of the websites and information that you could get information from. We could share all of this out, but these are really helpful for questions that you might have on anything related to the ADA. So with that, I wanted this to be conversational. I'm sorry, it was kind of like lecture-y, but I didn't want to forget anything. And there's so many more things I'm sure that are going to come to me. And I'll say, oh, I got to wait another 4 years before I get another lunch and learn. But hopefully I won't. And Nikki, you'll have me back earlier. Ashton, you'll have us back again to expand. But the key I'm going to stop sharing here. But the key takeaway also is hang on a second. Why? All right. Am I back? No. Sorry, I don't know how to stop sharing.
Oh, you're good.
You're stopped. We can see it.
Okay, I still see it on my end. Okay, great. Is just to make sure that, reach out. Let's do trainings. Let's do workshops. Let's have conversations. There's so many people on this call that could help out. And if you can help out, drop it in the chat and say, hey, I could help too. It's funny, before the pandemic, I literally felt like I was the only person in the entire world doing anything about accessibility. And my world has just opened up. The pandemic was horrible and I'm not making light of it, but it really reached so much further to find so many amazing accessibility professionals that have really we support each other. It's not just all about me. It's about the community that we serve. So are there any questions or thoughts or comments that we could address?
Yeah, we would love to open up the conversation now. The remainder of the time will be question and answer. So please drop your questions in and we can read them out to the moderators. And thank you guys so much for everything. As people are writing in questions, I actually have a question of my own. So for AI tools, are there specific AI tools that can be beneficial that you all can recommend? So say, for instance, do you know of a tool that can listen to a podcast recording and then convert it into text? Like, is there anything out there like that? Or are there any AI platforms that you can think of that are like, this would help for XYZ disability?
I
Scott?
am not aware of any yet. AI is going to get there. It is pretty amazing. Of course, we're extensively looking at AI and how is that going to come into play in the coming years. For what we're doing on the digital side, it's not quite there. In terms of having technology that you can use, I mentioned software that you can use that can find about 30% of the issues. I really like what's called the Wave tool. It's a plugin, so there's something that you can use to get started on your accessibility journey in terms of fixing your website and your app.
I'm
Right
gonna
on.
call on Claudio. I see you're here. Nice to see you, Claudio. Long time no see. I have a feeling you know something that you need to share with us. And as soon as I said that, I saw something in the chat. So have the floor and share what you know.
No, it's great to see you guys. And I really want to validate a lot of the stuff that you're saying, in terms of like with overlays and that sort of thing. Like I have a client of mine right now that got sued specifically for using an overlay on their website. But as far as like tools and stuff, you're talking about like an AI tool. I use one, it's Descript. It's actually the same tool that NPR radio uses, like Ira Glass and This American Life. They use that tool for producing their show. And you can take recorded audio or video in it, and it'll do an excellent job of doing transcription for you. It also has a sort of functionality where you can type in text, and it can, if it samples enough of the speaker's voice, it can actually correct little glitches and stuff in the video. You can actually type in stuff in that person's voice. So it's a powerful AI tool, but it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because I think people could use that for not so great purposes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge. Claudio is another wonderful resource for all things ADA. Well, I don't know all things ADA, but a lot of stuff. If he doesn't know, he'll find somebody that does know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Claudio. We have a question from Rebecca in the chat, and she said, I know that there's a lot of things out there, but I think this is also very helpful in terms of going back. So her question is, what's the biggest single ask that you'd like us to take back to our companies today to be more accessible?
Well, there are a lot of low-hanging fruit things that you could do right away, right? Making sure captions are turned on your Zoom call. And you have to do that in your original settings. So just go back, turn them on. People could have the choice to turn them on or turn them off if they want to. Nikki does it great now. I mean, years ago, when Nikki and I started, we forgot the captions. How do we put the captions on? Now I got it. Debbie Weems is here. She's another wonderful supporter of the ADA. She made sure she has her videos captioned now. She really worked it out, and she's a small business owner, but she's making the effort to make sure that captions are on. Little things like that right off the bat, making sure, anytime you put a video on your website, if you're talking to your donors, you're talking to people who are doing wonderful things, and you want to share that caption. Those are the first things that I think that you can do. And anybody else want to hop on, Scott, or anybody else?
Yeah, also budget, right? Usually this falls off because, we don't have the budget or we didn't budget for it. So budget, and this should be an annual thing. And especially in smaller businesses, right? Set aside some money and then figure out how you're going to allot that money back to, is it brick and mortar internal items or is it digital? Hopefully both.
Yeah, that's great for sure. Because the first thing that always gets cut from every program is anything accessible. And so budget is huge. That's a huge one. Make sure you have it, because you don't want to get caught without it, right? If you don't do it, you wish you would have done it, because now the litigation is more expensive than it would have been just to cover it in the first place. And we don't want to do it for that reason. We want to do it because it's the right thing to do, right? We don't want to, I'm going to get sued, I better make it accessible. No, like you said, Scott said, you'll sleep better at night if you know you did the right thing. At least I know I do. But I didn't ever have any gray hair before I started things accessible, just so you know.
Beautiful gray hair from our earlier conversation.
I was waiting for that one. I was hoping I was gonna reel you in.
Every time.
Anything else? Thoughts?
Anything else in the comments? I will say, for those of you that aren't able to see the comments, so there have been a couple of resources that have come through. So Claudio recommends askjan.org as a resource. So ASKJAN, askjan.org. Also, two people recommended Descript. That is one as well. And we'll send these out also. And then Wave Tool that Scott referenced, I posted a link to that in the chat as well. To Debbie's question, this is being recorded and we will be making the recording available so that you can share with your companies, friends, associates, everyone, hopefully on your LinkedIn and social media as well. It's such a crucial topic, especially as we're going further into, we're in almost 2025, and this hopefully will become commonplace. And as Beth mentioned, something that we don't even need to ask for. So thank you all so much for attending today. Thank you so much to our speakers and to Lizzie for ASL interpretation and Beth as well. We're so grateful for everyone for being here today. There were questions about the Tech Hub Hackathon, so I put those in the chat. And then also, too, as other little reminders, our annual Tech Talent Fest is going to be on October 16th this year at FIU. So that is also another really wonderful way to get noticed at the hackathon. A lot of people get hired straight from the start, straight from working at the hackathon, because people can see you working in real time. So, and of course, our biggest signature event of the year is Techpalooza. That is on December 11th at the Broward County Convention Center. And the theme is tech and emerging industries. And so, but all of these things we try at the very minimum to provide ASL and to be cognizant of the full disability community, to make sure our events are accessible. And I hope that this presentation today, thank you, Beth, Scott, and Lizzie, will help to bring these ideas and concepts back to your companies, organizations, and even in your personal life. We're all better together if we are all able to access the same information. So thank you all so much. Any last words from anyone, or?
Yes, I actually, of course, have to have something to say because, I don't ever get to. But I was watching the Paralympics this year and it was so beautiful. I don't know if anybody had a chance to watch it, but they said this new favorite thing of mine is inclusion revolution. That's the new hashtag, right? Inclusion revolution. Like it's time that we just make the change, not just at the Paralympic time, but all year round. I mean, Debbie Weems, thank you so much. She's a small business owner, LinkedIn guru. Everyone connect with her. She's amazing. And we'll look over your profile for 15 minutes for free if you make a appointment with her. How's that plug, Debbie? And so Debbie does lunch and learns every other month, and I interpret for those. I mean, bless her heart, she does captions. She's doing all the things that she can do as a small business owner. Janice, love you. So glad you're here. She's looking for a job. Anybody doing some hiring, refer. Let's, if we can plug each other in. We're all here to support each other and see each other win. And we need to be able to do that as best we can. Nikki and Ashton, thank you so much. Claudia, it's good to see you again. And Scott, appreciate it. Rebecca, always so much love. React Miami and Value City Furniture, who's been really wonderful about supporting ASL, but we're hoping that more sponsors will realize the importance and step up, because Nikki's heart is in the right place, but her budget needs some help. So that's my shameless plug, but thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and be a part of this wonderful ecosystem.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.